Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into our topic, the audacity of faith in unexplained suffering, by looking at a profoundly honest text from the Bible. If you've ever felt like you're doing absolutely everything right, you're seeking Him, and yet you're still facing incredible hardship, well, you definitely aren't alone. Today, we're going to explore the deep theological and practical realities of navigating those really difficult seasons.
It all starts with an incredibly raw look at enduring hardship. Just listen to this verse. Psalm 44:22 says, "Yet for your sake we face death all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered." I mean, wow. These are clearly not the words of someone walking in comfortable times, right? This captures the gritty reality of faith. It forces us to ask the hard questions about what it really means when our dedication to Him is met with intense hostility and trials. So, before we dive into the specific details, let's quickly outline the big picture for today. Section 1 is the historical context of Psalm 44. Section 2, faithful yet still suffering. Section 3, Paul and Romans 8. And finally, Section 4, praying on God's character. Okay, Section 1, historical context of Psalm 44. Let's provide a little historical context for this topic to see what was actually happening to the people who first prayed these words. Historically, His people were completely faithful to the covenant. They hadn't forgotten Him at all, and they definitely weren't out worshiping false idols. Yet, despite that absolute faithfulness, they were inexplicably scattered, humbled, and suffering. They weren't receiving consequences for their sin. And honestly, this completely shatters that simple formula we so often build in our heads. The idea that if we're just good, our circumstances will be easy. Instead, they were faithful, and yet it felt entirely like He had just forgotten them. Which brings us nicely to Section 2, faithful yet still suffering. Let's explore the core argument here. Let's be real, one of the absolutely most difficult experiences for a Christian is doing what is right, seeking the Father faithfully, and yet still facing a hostile world. Think about it. You might come back from a spiritually refreshing retreat, feeling closer to Him than ever before, only to walk right back through your front door and face the exact same overwhelming challenges you left behind. The fruit of your faithfulness just isn't visible yet. Obedience to Him doesn't magically create a protective bubble against the brokenness of the world. Looking at this through the lens of Reformed Calvinism theology, we call this unmerited suffering. It's the surprising reality that hardship isn't always a consequence of personal sin, but actually points us back to His absolute sovereignty. Interestingly enough, historical theologians have often pointed out that the most profound spiritual growth in the early church happens specifically during these periods of unmerited persecution. He purposes all things for His glory and our ultimate good, and that forces us to trust in His unseen hand rather than demanding an immediate explanation for all our pain. All right, moving on to Section 3, Paul and Romans 8. Let's shift over to the supporting evidence found in the New Testament. The Apostle Paul absolutely understood this feeling of unjustified hardship. And what's fascinating is he quotes this exact same psalm to reframe our understanding of suffering. He acknowledges the intense reality of it, but reveals that the Father's love is ultimately greater. Romans 8:37-9 says, "In all these things we are more than conquerors. Nothing in all creation can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus." So the very same suffering that the psalmist describes in total confusion is the exact suffering that Paul boldly declares cannot sever us from His unfailing love. Finally, Section 4, praying on God's character. How do we actually pray when we're right in the middle of that suffering? So let's compare and contrast two theories of prayer that we often see. The first camp relies completely on our own spiritual performance. It sounds like, rescue me because I've been so good, because I read the Bible today, because I've earned it. But the second theory is vastly different. It's approaching Him based entirely on His character and unfailing love. It sounds like, rescue me because of who you are. When suffering makes absolutely no sense, our own performance will fail us every time. We have to anchor our audacious prayers solely in His unchanging character. So let's break down the step-by-step process described in the document for audacious prayer. Step 1. Do not dress up your pain. Bring your honest lament directly to Him. Seriously, don't pretend you are at peace if your soul is actually crushed. Step 2. Trust His character over your own merit. And step 3. Pray bold, urgent, specific prayers based entirely on the cross, which is literally the ultimate historical proof of His unfailing love for us. When you pray from the foundation of the cross, you have full permission to ask Him to wake up, to rise up, and to act on your behalf. Now, focusing on the implications of this data for college students who are returning to the demanding boot camp of university life, this is where the rubber meets the road. Campus life can be incredibly isolating, right? You might face hostility for your beliefs or just the crushing weight of academics. But the goal isn't to seek a perfectly comfortable semester. The goal is to resolve to remain faithful simply because He is worthy in every single season. Your faithfulness in the middle of a confusing, stressful semester is actually a profound act of worship all on its own. Ultimately, everything anchors right here on this audacious plea from the Bible. Rise up and help us. Rescue us because of your unfailing love. We don't demand answers based on our good behavior. No, we lean entirely on the unfailing love of the Father and the finished work of Jesus on the cross. Even when life feels like we are sheep heading straight for the slaughter, we can boldly call on Him, knowing for a fact that absolutely nothing can separate us from His grip. To finish with a clearer conclusion of the research today, we see that the psalmist brought his pain honestly to Him rather than pretending everything was just fine. So I want to leave you with this provocative question to reflect on. What would honest lament actually look like for you today? How does anchoring your prayers in His character rather than your own track record completely change the way you pray in your hardest seasons? Think about that as you face your own boot camps this week. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and we'll catch you next time.